Okay. Hi, Jake. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. I'm doing well. I'm really excited for this.
hmm
And very thankful that you agreed to be on my podcast. I feel like it's always kind of nerve-wracking for me to reach out to people that have no idea who I am. We've never met. Like and be like,
Yeah.
"Hey,
Yeah.
you don't know me, but"
Yeah.
So, I appreciate you being willing to be on and talk to me
Mhm.
today. Before we start, can you just introduce yourself to everyone?
Yeah. My name is Jake White. So, yeah, just a little bit of my background. I live in West Virginia. So I come from a farming background. So my dad is a cattle farmer. So we live on about 555 acres of
Oh my gosh.
land with horses and cows and sheep. So, yeah, and I have two boys, Luke and Abel, and then a wife named Ellie. So, and we have like a little homestead on that property.
Oh, that's
So
cool.
we raise chickens and
Oh,
have dogs and stuff. So, but yeah, I think that's a big part of my
yeah.
background and is just feeling connected to the earth and connected to the land. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, when I'm not on the farm, then I'm down in my office in Winchester, Virginia, where I offer somatic experiencing appointments. I work with people one on one, so that's takes up most of my time, and
Yeah.
mainly just focusing on helping people with their nervous system and
Mhm.
how to move through and navigate through traumatic events in their life. So,
Mhm.
trauma creates so much overwhelm for our nervous system, and it's almost like a wound that we go through. So
Yeah.
there's not a lot of understanding of how to heal on that level of our nervous system to just to help support the body to actually release stress and trauma and to support ourselves through that and to get to a place where we're feeling more stable and more regulated. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean that's I just absolutely love helping people in that way and watching people improve and their
Mhm.
life start to open up and just seeing them actually like really move past trauma and seeing that happen in the body. I think the nervous system is so the key to
Yeah.
understanding how people recover from trauma and watching them actually move through that process of
Totally.
experiencing something stressful and difficult, but then seeing how we move out of that and repair and become more confident. I think that's
Mhm.
exactly what our nervous system is meant to do. So yeah,
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
that's cool. Well, I'm excited to talk about somatic experiencing. But
hmm
before we do that, I would love to hear more about cattle farming.
Yeah. Okay.
It's so funny. It is my dream and will probably never happen to live on a farm. I would love to
hmm
live on a farm
hmm
and have
hmm
like chickens and horses and, have to go out and like take care of the animals. And it's just sounds so magical. It probably is not
hmm
magical at all. But my
Yes.
husband is not, that is not my husband. So
Yeah.
we will probably never live on a farm. But I would love
Uh-huh.
to know, like, what do you love about living on a farm?
For me, it was the connection with the animals is what I
Yeah.
always loved. There's a lot of fun. I mean, there's a lot of fun to like riding around on
Yeah.
horses. So we always use horses to push the
Oh
cows
my
and stuff.
gosh.
And,
That's so cool.
my dad would take off and we'd be galloping, through the pasture and,
Oh,
um, like hats flying off our heads
yeah.
and stuff. And then moving the cattle on like horseback and stuff. It's just a lot of fun. But there's a synchronization that you develop between the
Mhm.
horse, the cows, and then the dogs. And my dad had this beautiful way of like herding with the horses, but using the dogs to also push the cattle too. And it was just like this symbiotic relationship
Yeah.
that was always happening. So there was a lot of like just a lot of excitement to living on a farm. Um, it's not easy. You're
Yeah.
kicked, you're stomped, you're pushed around, you have to deliver calves in the middle of winter,
Oh my
which I
gosh.
did a lot growing up,
Crazy.
helping the cows
Yeah.
to give birth. And then, you're almost like the doctor too in a way. So
Mhm.
if an animal gets hurt, you spend that time to like help to heal it and stuff. And I think that was kind of my introduction into healing was this care
Mm.
for animals.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I always found that I gravitated towards wanting to sit with an animal that was hurt or like nursing it in the winter and
Mhm.
so that was like the first connection I made
Mhm.
with healing. I think that's kind of like taken me all the way to this point.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
That's really
yeah.
cool. Yeah.
hmm
Well, I am slightly jealous that you live on a farm, but Also, I wouldn't like the hard part, so it
Yeah,
probably
yeah,
is fine.
yeah. Well, get the taste of it,
I
go on a
know.
horseback.
I know, right?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Okay. Well, I would love to just start with finding out, how do you define trauma?
Um, yeah, I think trauma is anything that causes overwhelm in our nervous system past the point where we can actually cope with it and rebound from it and regulate
Mhm.
through it. So like if something's so overwhelming that we're not able to process it in our body,
Yeah.
then we have to resort, the nervous system kind of takes over and it pushes us into more of a way of adapting. And so we end up actually just shutting down that stress and that trauma. And so it never gets integrated. And so therefore it's held as a memory in our body as an
Mhm.
autonomic response, in relation to that trauma. So it's just anything that has overwhelmed our nervous system past our capacity to actually just process that stress and regulate it.
Yeah, that makes sense. What would that look like to, just from a very elementary level? Like, what would it look like if someone's like, "What do you mean you hold trauma in your body?"
Yeah. Well, I think we can all just we've all experienced trauma. So I think we all
Mhm.
kind of, in varying degrees. So I think we can all kind of relate to, events that cause overwhelm. So someone might, look at you funny and then your chest tightens,
Mhm.
your stomach turns into knots, or you might like, something might happen on the road and you get really, really scared and overwhelmed. There's a close accident and
Mhm.
you feel really adrenalized and your heart is racing.
Mhm.
That's a response of the autonomic nervous system that is in relation to, external event that's causing some type of disruption or some type of trauma. And so, but I think that a lot of times with people that have experienced extreme states of trauma, that that event was just so big that they couldn't really recover from it. So
Mhm.
if I experience a close call on the road, I'm going to become really adrenalized, but then once I know I'm safe, everything's going to come back
Awesome.
down,
Yeah.
and regulate. But if that stressor is happening all the time, or if it was a really big event that was so unexpected, then I experience that extreme amount of adrenaline. But then again, I'm not able to recover. And then my body has to compensate and hold that stress in, and so later on things happen that causes mirrors that stress. And then I
Mhm.
re-experience those old memories. So a lot of times that's what's happening to people that have been through trauma and haven't
Yeah.
processed it, that they're always kind of experiencing a state of alarm within their nervous system. So
Mhm.
for someone who's experienced trauma, we experience is that one moment, of maybe having that adrenalized state. But for a person who's experienced, a history of trauma, that's probably a normal state for them.
Yeah.
That's a normal everyday experience.
Does this tie into the ACEs, adverse childhood experiences?
Yeah, yeah, I would say so. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah.
So um the more adversity that we experience in our childhood, chronic trauma,
Hmm.
chronic
Hmm.
adversity, right? Then as we grow into adults, we're still holding that.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, so if somebody that is listening is kind of hearing this and thinking like, well, I experienced a lot, but I'm fine. What are some
Hmm.
things that you could point out that be like, maybe consider this if you're experiencing this? Are there kind of just that, like, as a practitioner yourself, that you see commonly? Like, I do see people who have
Hmm.
headaches often, or do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah. I think if we're feeling constantly on edge and
Hmm.
worrying and we're overwhelmed, consistently,
Yeah.
that's definitely a symptom. If we feel a lot of emotional highs and lows, in our like emotions and our demeanor, that can be definitely a sign,
Yeah.
that we've been through something that's traumatic, or we had a lot of stress in our environment as we were growing up. And um, I think a lot of times, a lot of my clients experience a lot of depression too, like lack of
Mm-hmm.
motivation
Mm-hmm.
and depression. And that's a lot of times a sign that, we're kind of moving into more of that freeze response, to
Yeah.
cope.
Yep.
And so with a lot of the stress that we're experiencing in life, we're starting to move into a freeze, and our body is just starting to contain, that stress. So
Yeah.
that's really common. A lot of people, it's having some type of autoimmune or
Mm.
like illness that's happened
Yeah.
in their life. Where in a lot of my clients, they don't have no one, a doctor can't really tell them where it's coming from,
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
or
Okay.
what's causing it, or
Yeah.
the direct indicator, for it. But I'm always looking at like, well, what is the amount of stress that this nervous system is under,
Yeah.
right now, and are they living more through their sympathetic nervous system or their freeze response to cope with life,
Right.
you know? And so that pressure on their autonomic nervous system is what can eventually lead to some type of illness,
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
You talk about how you started with energy medicine.
Hmm.
So I think I know what that is, but I'm not certain.
Right.
And I would love to hear you share more about that before then we get into somatic experiencing.
Yeah, I think energy medicine was like my doorway into the healing
Hmm.
field. So yeah, I think for me it's I just signed up for a course on it. It was a
Okay.
two-year course, and it actually came along because I was in real need of healing. I was in a
Mm,
real place of depression, panic attacks,
mm,
anxiety, OCD, and I really had no idea what the cause was. So,
yeah.
when I signed up for this program, it said like that we'll work on healing you, that our focus will be on your self-healing so you can eventually help others. So
So
that's
you were
why I
kind of
signed
looking
up.
for relief for yourself.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. Yeah. And then it was really interesting because I had no idea what to expect, but I sat down in this group and we were in a circle all together, on the floor.
Yeah.
And that's not what I expected
Yeah.
from the school I was going to.
Go
So
sit
I
at
was
a
like,
desk in rows. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And I've never felt so scared in my life. I knew, I was like, oh my gosh,
What
like
have I
it's
done?
like my soul had taken me into this
Yeah.
healing environment that I needed.
Yeah.
But then another part of me felt like, oh my gosh, this is what I've always been looking for.
Mm-hmm.
Because I always wanted an environment where someone could meet me
Mm-hmm.
and could accept me just the way I was,
Mm-hmm.
and just really be with me through my emotions in this group. Like really, really could do that. And
Mm-hmm.
that was the main focus. So we learned all these different techniques, but a lot of the healing was about being able to communicate and feel things in this group while people were there to be very, very compassionate,
Mm.
like, and witness our process. And I think that was the main teaching,
Yeah.
when you're working with someone, is to be like this kind of non-judgmental source of presence for someone, in their
Yeah.
healing. And that was like what I got from others and what I started to learn to do for myself. But energy medicine itself is working with the electromagnetic field of
Mm-hmm.
the body. So it's
Okay.
working with the autonomic nervous system, the central nervous system, and basically that electrical current through the body creates a field around us. So it's
Mm-hmm.
our magnetic field.
Mm-hmm.
And what we learned in that program is how to intuit into people's nervous system, into that electromagnetic field. And so I'm looking for places where they're holding tension,
Mm.
where there's imbalance. There might be, places where we're holding a lot of dynamics around relationships,
Mm-hmm.
and we're looking at the physical way that they're holding that
Okay. Yeah.
within their body. So, I mean, we can see that every day.
Yeah.
Mom comes in, and our head drops
Yeah.
and we tuck, and so that's a response of the nervous system that we're starting to intuit into. And what the process is in that session is to help people to move toward those things where they're
Mm-hmm.
holding that tension, and then to support them and to ask them some questions so we can create a little dialogue around it, but to help them feel their body. And the idea is just that this energy wants to move,
Yeah.
and so it wants to be expressed, in a way so it can be released. So our body doesn't want to hold on to anything. It wants to move and flow through it and release it.
Yeah.
And then that helps a person to just feel more relaxed, and stimulates that healing process when their parasympathetic is starting to engage. So
Yeah.
we're really doing that in a way where I'm using my hands to support the person.
Okay.
We're kind of shifting and moving energy, helping them to feel into it.
Okay.
There's also a lot of work on the chakra systems,
Mm-hmm.
we learned about how the organs hold on to emotions and
Yeah.
how to help them to unwind and release emotionally. And
Okay.
there's learned about like symbology of the body too, like what a certain pattern, what that might mean for their life and stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, but there's a lot to it.
Yeah. It's so
Yeah, yeah.
fascinating. Yeah.
Mhm.
So then that led you to somatic experiencing.
Yeah, once I got out, I started my private practice after that.
Okay.
Um, and then like I had some clients come in and they just had these really severe traumas. And
Mm-hmm.
I realized that I was like, whoa, I need to really get a little more specific with the trauma work. And it's so easy when you see someone that's going through something and
Yeah.
they're overwhelmed. It's so easy to just dive right in with them,
Yeah.
and like really validate their pain. And what I saw is that was I learned how to be with somebody,
Mm-hmm.
when they're processing their pain. But I didn't really learn the nuances of their nervous system,
Mm.
and the fact that actually reinforcing pain for someone might actually be really counterproductive.
Okay.
You might be actually overwhelming that person more and more. And so like what I learned, that took me into somatic experiencing, because I was
Okay.
like, I
Yeah.
really need to learn about this because people are getting overwhelmed, you know, in my session,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
And so then that took me into SE, and it really came just out of the blue. Like it was like something that just kind of came across my
Yeah.
desk, my computer, where I saw a little thing about it and started to do some research, like opened up to the first introductory session, and went to that, and then just realized that the draw towards it being really around the nervous system, and how they talked about animals and wildlife a lot, that
Mm-hmm.
really took me back to
Yeah.
farming. And
Yeah.
and I was like, whoa, that's really something I connect with a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So that made me really curious about it. So um,
Yeah.
that's how I got into it.
Okay.
So
So tell us what it is. What is it? Like all the things. What is it? What does it do? What do you do if somebody is
hmm
like, oh, this sounds like it might be my jam,
hmm
right? What can they expect?
Yeah. Well, somatic experiencing, it's a technique that works with the autonomic nervous system, and it comes from a man named Dr. Peter Levine. I don't know if you've
Yeah.
ever
Yeah.
heard of him. So
I
he's
don't
like,
think I made that connection that he started it.
mhm,
Okay. That's
yeah,
cool.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. It's his whole life's work and his institute
Okay.
that he developed. But what he saw is that humans that he worked with, because he was a psychologist, that humans didn't recover from trauma,
Mm-hmm.
really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
That people had these traumas and that they were still dealing with them in their present life, and they could have had that trauma when they were, young, when they were a kid.
Mm-hmm.
But they were still processing it, still dealing with it, still affected by it. But he also studied animals too. So
Mm-hmm.
he saw that animals would recover from trauma, if they had it, yesterday, if they
Yeah.
went through it. Um, and he knew the nervous system, so he understood that we share the very similar parts of the nervous system. So like a wild animal, mammal has a brainstem and limbic system, and humans
Mm-hmm.
have that basic part of our nervous system too, brainstem and that limbic system. So he saw that there must be some innate ways that our animals are working through our trauma that humans aren't. And
Okay.
so what he saw is that when an animal goes through something really traumatic, say if a cheetah is chasing an impala,
Yeah.
that the impala gets away eventually, and then it will actually reset its nervous system. So it will start to like orient towards group. It'll start to shake.
Mm-hmm.
It might run or buck, or it has all these natural ways that it's releasing that stress, and that's because it's always attached and connected to its body. It's
Okay.
always alive in its body. It's connected to its instinct, so it just naturally releases that stress.
Mm-hmm.
But as humans, what we do is we can actually become afraid of our sensation. We
Oh,
can learn
interesting.
that
Yeah.
feeling this emotion isn't socially acceptable to mom, or
Yeah.
feeling this overwhelmed makes mom stressed out, so therefore I'm
Yeah.
going to suppress this.
Mm-hmm.
Or I don't feel like I can tell anyone about this trauma that I experienced because people won't understand and I'll be
Mm-hmm.
shamed and judged for it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the way that we hold our emotions, and we contain it because we have that cognitive part of our brain that can
Right.
intuit and create perception around our feelings and emotions. And so
Right.
we are constantly suppressing that. So somatic experiencing is a way to get people back in touch with their nervous system so they can kind of rediscover these innate ways that their body releases and processes stress
Okay. Yeah.
through like staking and movement and
Mm-hmm.
temperature change and vocalizing about
Mm-hmm.
something that's happened. And we bring in a lot too around social engagement and the importance of having a relationship with somebody to support healing.
Okay.
That's the way humans heal. So
Yeah.
having a person that's really regulated with you that can help you go towards these difficult things, but to feel them in a safe way, in a slow way, and process them through the body, that just really stimulates healing and allows the body to go through its natural cycle,
Mm-hmm.
with the support of another person there,
Right.
you know, to help through that process. So, um, I think we all want to be like seen, heard,
Yeah.
loved. That's like the core of our needs. And
Yeah.
I think trauma a lot of times makes it so we have to withdraw, we have to pull away
Mm-hmm.
from that connection. And so I think for a lot of us, the healing comes from having these experiences, but then being able to share them and being able to be seen in a new way with like a
Mm-hmm.
therapist or a practitioner and being supported through it. So that's really the recovery,
Yeah.
from trauma. So
Yeah.
yeah,
So are
yeah.
you the connected other person for them, or do they need to have someone in their life that is that outside of the therapeutic setting?
Yeah, well, I think in sessions we're always trying to, yeah, of course, the therapist or the practitioner is a connected person
Right.
for them, and that's the role we play. But um, I always love to when I first meet with a client, I'm not looking for their trauma, I'm looking for their resources initially.
Yeah.
So they might come in really, stressed and sad and depressed and overwhelmed, but I'm really looking at like what's going to help this person start to have this kind of broader sense of resource and safety
Mm-hmm.
first. So I think we are looking for, you know, it could be a grandparent,
Mm-hmm.
all these external resources that we can start to collect because it changes our body and our relationship with our body when we have resources. We
Mm-hmm.
start to feel more upright, our posture changes. We start to feel more light and fluid and more connected to our emotions. And so, we're not trying to reinforce the traumatic pattern. We're trying to reinforce something that's more healing.
Right.
So we want to collect those resources first. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, I think that's one of the roles to help people find those resources and kind of, that's a big part of the puzzle that we're trying to, stitch together. So,
Yeah. What if someone
mhm.
doesn't have a safe person to connect with? Or
Mhm.
do you find that most people do have someone, you just have to help them figure that out?
Yeah, I think there's always something that got us to this point,
Yeah. Yeah.
There really is. Like there's something that's made it so we've gotten to this point. And so I think the only way we can survive is through having some type of relationship,
Mm-hmm.
with safety that can exist. And so like it's very rare that I find anyone
Okay.
that doesn't have a resource, but a lot of times it can be there was no human that was safe, but
Yeah.
there was this dog, you know,
Yeah.
or there was this like there's this connection. Like I'll often like be really curious, like where did people go when they were upset?
Mm-hmm.
Like that's something I'll investigate with
Okay.
clients. And
Mm-hmm.
like what mom and dad were fighting, I ran out to the garden.
Mm,
But
mm.
that's that person finding safety. It's their
Yeah.
intuitive, intelligent way that they knew to go towards something that was safe. And so
Yeah.
that's something we just really want to discover, is that actually, this you knew this all along,
Mm-hmm.
this wisdom in your body to know what was safe. And I think that really starts a lot of listening to ourselves
Yeah.
and even just trusting ourselves that like that we can find safety. And then like a lot of times there's a lot of disconnection because of trauma, like
Mm-hmm.
with our body. And so when we find those safe places and those resources, then we can start to find the body a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
you know, feeling our feet on the ground. I was talking to a client today and started talking about the garden and their hands went like this.
Mm-hmm.
They started putting their hands out, and then they started talking about their trauma, and their hands started to go like this.
Oh, yeah.
And we just explored that a little bit, is actually that they had felt like when they were away from that person and they were in their garden, they were
Yeah.
rooted and grounded, and they could feel their legs, underneath them. And then they started to lift up a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
and so, yeah, it's using those resources and start to create this connection with their body and rediscover that connection.
Yeah. So it is different for everyone because everyone has a different experience.
Yeah, I think that's the interesting part of this work,
Yeah.
is that you're learning, this person, their nervous system. You think of our nervous system as the thing that connects us with life.
Yeah.
So you're learning what connects this person with life in
Yeah.
this positive way that's not a part of trauma, what can help them feel more connected and more
Mm-hmm.
rooted and more grounded and more safe in themselves. So um yeah, but that's the part I love about it, is that you get to that everyone's different,
Mm-hmm.
and you get to work with a different nervous system and just learn about them, and so in their story, starts to unfold. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
That's cool.
Hmm.
Um, okay. So there's one thing I love that you said when I asked about trauma. I love
Hmm.
that you said you wish more people did not see their trauma as something to fix or be ashamed of.
Hmm.
That
Hmm.
was like, I've never heard anybody say that. And I
Hmm.
I definitely feel like I want to fix my trauma. And
Hmm.
there's I had counseling today and I was talking about like a specific situation that it's like when that happens, I spiral into shame
Hmm.
because that's just like I think what we do, right?
Hmm.
And so that really struck me when I read that. I was like, wow. I mean, but what does that look like then?
Hmm.
Right?
Yeah, well, it's this recreating connection and relationship, with our body through something that creates stress. And I
Uh-huh.
think you're right. The tendency is that when we feel a sense of stress and
Uh-huh.
overwhelm, then if that's not been accepted and seen by others,
Mhm.
then it's something that we had to push away
Yep.
and keep from other people. And that's exactly what shame does.
Yeah.
So a lot of us are very ashamed of the things that we went through. We're ashamed of these feelings because other people may have not been present for them and able to support them.
Mhm.
So we learn through shame to kind of push them away.
Mhm.
But that's what exactly makes it so we hold that trauma in our body. We hold that overwhelm and those emotions in. So I think that's the real lesson in learning about trauma, is that this is actually a response that wants to be felt, reconnected with
Mhm.
ourselves, that there can be like more space, love, acceptance for it to be felt. And that also part of that healing is that it can be shared with others.
Mhm.
And that when we share it and it's authentic and it's vulnerable, then we learn that actually other people receive it and
Mhm.
appreciate it and have a similar life story,
Yeah.
and so it's by fixing it, we're pushing it away.
Mm. Yeah.
Where actually it's not something that wants to be pushed away. It's something that wants to be
Yeah.
held and accepted and
Hmm.
um, released. You know.
That's good. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, I
Hmm.
feel like I that's gonna stick with me for a while. So thank you for
Hmm.
saying
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
because I'm
Yeah.
like, wow, that's good.
Hmm.
So I'm just curious if I know we've talked about how it can be different for everyone. Everyone's experience is different, but is there something that you could say, yeah, this is something you could do right now at home that can just start you on this path, on this journey?
Hmm. Hmm. Um, yeah, I think it's the little things really matter a lot in somatic work,
Hmm.
and I think just sometimes just slowing down a little bit.
Okay.
I know that seems small, but when we're constantly in a state of like our sympathetic and we're constantly in a state of overwhelm and that's our
Yeah.
normal, we're
Yeah.
always going really, really fast.
Hmm.
And one of the things that I use the most is actually my hands.
Okay.
So I'll actually slow down my movements a little bit,
Okay.
you know. and I'll slow down my walking a little bit, and then I'll feel my feet on the ground. And so every time I become dysregulated
Mm-hmm.
and overwhelmed, I kind of come back a little bit
Okay.
to feeling my feet on the ground. I'll slow down my movements a little bit. And that's actually, we're re-engaging our parasympathetic when we do that, because that's
Mm-hmm.
the parasympathetic is the slower part of our nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
Sympathetic speeds us up. So we're learning how to slow down. Um, I really love then, like, I'll put my hand on my chest,
Mm-hmm.
so if I'm getting used to holding sensation,
Okay.
with my hands. So if I feel anything, if I feel pain or shame or anguish, I will go and I'll hold it and I'll
Mm-hmm.
contain it,
Mm-hmm.
with my body. And that's naturally, that's what our body's meant to do. The body's meant to hold our stress response.
Okay.
And this gets me in touch with just like being able to hold and stay present with a feeling or sensation. And that builds over time. Over time
Mm-hmm.
we have a little more capacity to stay with, difficult sensations. So I think just initially that slowing down, our pacing, getting present a little bit more, like re-engaging with our environment,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and then we're slowly learning to tap in through slowness to be able to actually process, and
Yeah.
hold sensation, with our hands. So I think that's really doable,
Oh yeah, for sure.
really easy. Yeah.
Yeah. It almost makes me think of like some breath work, how that is really doable, doing just some
Hmm.
really basic breath work, which is also a way of like slowing down.
Hmm. Hmm.
So yeah, I love that. I think that is
Hmm.
super doable and anyone could do that, right? That's what it feels
Yeah, yeah.
like.
And my hands are always here, like,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, a
Yeah.
lot of our emotions and our dysregulation, it's felt through our abdomen,
Okay. Yeah.
so like that's where we feel a lot of the intensity of our emotions.
Yeah.
So a lot of times, like, that slowing down, bringing connection with our hands, feeling our feet on the ground, it actually brings us away from that dysregulation.
Okay. Yeah.
So it creates a little bit of process where we're going more periphery from it,
Mm-hmm.
where in our energy, everything will take us
Come in.
towards
Mm-hmm.
that core. It'll like come into the core,
Mm-hmm.
you know. Um, and so we're just creating a little distance away from that sometimes, you
Yeah.
know.
That
Yeah.
makes sense. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. Um, this has been so fascinating.
Hmm.
I just love hearing all about this. I'm wondering
Hmm.
if there's anything else with somatic experiencing that you wanted to cover. And then I would love for you to share where people can find you.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. What else? Um, yeah, I think it's always important for me just to let people know that, like, how possible healing is.
Yeah.
Like, we're designed to heal, and especially with our stress or anxiety or
Hmm.
overwhelm, it just, those can feel so isolating.
Yeah.
And it feels like, we experience these things all the time. They don't seem to change or go anywhere. But if we find the right support and the right tools, these things are really can change, and our body knows how to process it.
Yeah.
Our body knows how to process our stress. And I think that's what we need to start to, like, trust,
Hmm.
because it's really starting to trust ourselves
Yeah.
to be able to
Yeah.
stay with something and feel it. And I think that is a process of really growing,
Totally.
growing in our nervous system.
That
So,
can be hard.
um, yeah, and I just always want to let people know that this is, healing is so possible. We all
Mhm.
have trauma. We all have experienced things that are really overwhelming,
Yeah.
but that we can all recover from it. And that, our body is really, really designed to do it. So, and our
Hmm.
nervous system is designed to do it. So, a lot of times it's about finding that support, you
Yeah.
know, and the right tools that we can start to actually implement that support with ourselves,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, another thing is just that somatic experience is a very dynamic and, like, a live process.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
we're not always, like, just focusing on telling the story of the trauma. We're really getting in touch with our body in
Yeah.
very positive ways. So I
Yeah.
think people come to this, like, idea of trauma, and it just feels so daunting and
Yeah.
overwhelming. And with SE, we're really focusing on bringing much more aliveness and
Mhm.
feeling connected, feeling alive. So a big part of this has to be very, very positive, you
Mhm.
know, positive engagement. And yes, we go towards the negative stuff because
Yeah.
we have to start to release some of the stress that we've been holding. Um, but that the work too is really about recovery and
Hmm.
feeling better and these positive things that we can create,
Yeah.
relationships we can create with ourselves and our bodies. So I just like to say
Well,
that.
I think that's good too, because I think there's a lot of people that are hesitant to start any type of therapeutic healing modality because it feels daunting to be like, really? Like, I'm
Hmm.
43. Do I really have to go through all of, you know what I mean? Like,
Hmm. Hmm.
and so to hear like it's not all, it can feel good, right? Like
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
we can learn so much about ourselves, and it doesn't, you're not going to go back to feeling the way you felt in those moments every single day, right? We're not
Hmm.
going back to
Hmm.
that. So
Hmm.
I think that that's good for you to
Hmm.
share that. I think it helps people who maybe are on the fence with, you
Hmm.
know, moving forward in healing. And this is part of why I love to have different um, therapists and people come on and share their stories, is because like EMDR works amazing for me, and it has been
Hmm.
like the thing that has
Hmm.
helped me find the most healing right now, right? But
Hmm.
that doesn't
Hmm.
mean that that's the thing for everyone. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, so I I'm actually really intrigued about somatic experiencing, and I'm like,
Hmm.
I think I want to learn more about this.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. There's so much research around it, and
Yeah. Yeah.
like all you'd have to do is type in somatic experiencing on YouTube, and you'd find
Right.
a million videos and books and stuff. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, so where can people find you?
Yeah. On Instagram, it's at Jake White Healing. So I try
Okay.
to, like, on my feed, just give people a lot of tools and information about somatic work in the nervous system. So that's a
Yeah.
great way to get some information, some content, and even some practices for yourself. Yeah, my website is jakewhitehealing.com. So
Okay.
you can visit that. That gives an overview of trauma
Okay.
and talks about all the services I offer, and
Perfect.
that's where they can get in contact with me. So yep.
Cool. Okay. Well, I appreciate you sharing. I do have one final question for you, though.
Hmm.
If you could just share with us 3 resources that you would recommend for trauma healing.
Hmm. Yeah. Probably I would start with Peter Levine and his work,
Okay. Yeah.
and his books. So,
Yeah.
Waking the Tiger is one of
Yes.
my favorite books,
Mhm.
and he has another book about memory, and trauma, and
Mhm.
that is like a book I keep with me. I just love
Mhm.
that book so much.
Okay.
So I think it's Trauma and Memory in the Search for a Living Past
Okay.
is that book. Yeah, I think if you go to traumahealing.org, that's the
Okay.
Somatic Experiencing website. So
Okay.
they have practitioners. They have that's where the school, people can sign up for the school.
Okay.
They have webinars, and then also they have a practitioner directory, so you can find a
Oh,
somatic
great.
experiencing practitioner like in your city or wherever you live.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
that's a great resource. But
Mhm.
um, yeah, I think that what's another resource? I'm just gonna pick the favorite teacher right now. I love Diane Poole-Heller. She's
Oh, yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
works with attachment.
Uh-huh.
She's an FE faculty too. But
Okay.
um,
Okay.
any of her books and her research around
Mhm.
those early attachment
Mhm.
patterns and dynamics, I think so much of our healing has to do with that early attachment. So
Totally. Yeah.
that's a current love of mine. So,
Yeah. Okay.
so
I will make
yeah.
sure I link everything that we talked about in the show notes so people can just
Hmm.
come find all of this. And yeah, again, I appreciate you coming on and sharing your knowledge with all of us. And I know that what you have shared is going to touch somebody, because that's just how the world works. So I
Yeah.
appreciate
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
appreciate you too. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, friend. Well, I thank you so much for being on, and have a great rest of your day.
Yeah. You too.
Okay. Thank you.